And by the way, not in jest, not sarcastically, he's agreeing with Paul Ryan. He says, look, we do have to do something about Social Security and Medicare. What does he mean by do something about Social Security and Medicare? Is he talking about increasing it? No, he's not. And considering how Joe Biden has been over the course of his career in the sense of balanced budget amendment, freezing, or, putting Social Security on the table to be cut. I've shown you the videos. You can see it for yourself. Now, Sanders makes the point to Anderson Cooper that Joe Biden was talking about cutting Social Security. Now, I've made the point that that argument should have been made earlier. That argument should have been made far earlier because, again, one of Joe Biden's main selling points is the elderly. And I kept making the point that Joe Biden needs to be hit in his mass. And his mass in this case is blacks, elderly, and there was one more. Oh, and electability. That one wasn't a demographic. It was mostly just the selling point that Joe Biden is running on. I've shown you 3 videos where Joe Biden is talking about doing something to Social Security that is not in the best interest of the beneficiaries of Social Security. So why then? How on earth does Politifact evaluate Bernie Sanders saying Joe Biden, that he was talking up Paul Ryan and saying that Paul Ryan was right in cutting Social Security and Medicare? Politifact comes back and says, this is false. I've shown you 3 videos. And they come back and said this is false. And they say basically, well, he didn't give it an overarching full context when he was talking about Joe Biden agreeing with Paul Ryan that something needed to be done about Social Security and Medicare. And then they even go so far as to say he was being sarcastic. Like, the person who wrote this, the author of this particular Politifact piece, went above and beyond to give Joe Biden every benefit of the doubt, even when they had to twist themselves into a pretzel to do so. This is just as bad as the Washington Post one. Actually, no, this is not that bad because nothing is that bad. Washington Post evaluates Bernie Sanders saying that over 500,000 people go bankrupt each year because they don't have health care. And they evaluate it false. They go so far as to call the author of the study. The author of the study says, yes, he's right. I mean, actually, it's 530,000, but, fair enough. And they still come back false. And my only point is, this is a fail. You had one job. Just one job. That's all. One job. Your name is literally Politifact. When we were talking about name for the show that's going to take place next week, one of the things came up with, what do I know? That was one that Bob came up with. And I was like, oh, Bob, I don't like that one. Because the issue of no is a hard thing. I mean, for the most part, we're in our rooms, we're in our homes. Information gets to us by multiple sources with people with all sorts of aims and agendas and giving us that particular information. Stuff happens on the other side of the world. How on earth, even from the standpoint of media, who at this point is mostly stenographers, I mean, after all, the fact that a Politifact thing exists in the first place gets across a failure of media. It just does. What is media's job if it is not to determine what is true? And if you need an organization out there to actually literally say that that's their mission, then apparently media wasn't up to the task. We get information after it's gone through multiple sources. What's true, or what do I know as a flat fact, is somewhat of a difficult thing. And that's a hurdle I don't necessarily want to run with as a title for the show. Well, Politifact didn't have that level of introspection, and they said, fuck it. We deal with facts. Facts. Did Biden laud a Paul Ryan proposal to cut Social Security as Bernie Sanders' campaign said? Well, the video is here. Now, don't get me wrong. Biden doesn't go as far as Paul Ryan, meaning Paul Ryan going after it. Paul Ryan is somewhat of a lunatic on this stuff. So Biden might not have gone as far. But the issue here is whether or not Biden has a history of wanting to cut Social Security, and whether or not, when Sanders brings up the fact that Biden mentions Paul Ryan and said Paul Ryan was correct, that wasn't wrong. Politifact has failed miserably on this. They failed miserably on this. Context. As if that it is not the candidate's responsibility to give the talking points of the other opposition. What he said was flat fact true. Paul Ryan, or Biden, did talk up Paul Ryan. Biden has a history of talking about cuts to Social Security or fixes or amendments. And they even, in the document itself, they say, well, two things. One, we said Biden's speech to Mark Goldstein, senior vice president for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Now, they sent this to a right-wing organization and says, hey, what do you think about this? That's criminally negligent. Now, is it intentional or they're incompetent? Which one is it? Also, they made this point, again, that gets across somewhat of a failing here, but right here. So this is what they're using now to say that Sanders is wrong. This is in their own document where they're trying to explain why Sanders is wrong. Maybe you guys do, so we need a pro-growth progressive tax code that treats workers as job creators as well, not just investors, that get rid of unproductive loopholes like stepped up basis. And it raises enough revenue to make sure that Social Security and Medicare can stay. It still needs adjustments, but can stay. Now, you tell me, what does adjustments mean? Is Joe Biden in right here, is he talking about adjusting it higher? Or is he talking about adjusting it lower? He's talking about adjusting it lower. And if he isn't talking about adjusting it lower, meaning this is just a euphemism. It's as if the individual who wrote this didn't know what a euphemism was. Right here, this kills your case. Politifact, in your own document, it kills your case. An adjustment is a cut. Whether you want to call it a cut, whether you want to call it a freeze, whether you want to call it not going, it's political talk for cut. Anybody and their mama should know that. Is Joe Biden pushing to adjust Social Security up? The answer is no. Is he talking about adjusting it downward or pegging it to something? The answer is yes. Did he say Paul Ryan was right? Yes. He said Paul Ryan was right in the context that something needed to be done about Social Security. Well, that's the argument. Your entire document, you wrote an entire thing trying to say that Sanders was wrong, when even in your own document, right here, adjustments, gets across that Biden himself is talking about this. Meaning the thing that you're trying to use to disprove Sanders is the thing that makes this point. Biden was talking about cutting Social Security, and he did make the point that Paul Ryan was right in going after those services. Amazing. Politifact, my ass. Can't believe they, that's so erroneous. That's so over the table. Joe is running the weakest campaign in history. Marcus Will. He is, right? Look. When I used to play Pac-Man real well. So my dad wasn't necessarily around, but one of the things he did really well was Pac-Man. He could breathtakingly good at it. Me, I started playing the game and I could get maybe 150,000. I was pretty proficient at it. And I started by playing recently and I realized, God, I suck at this game now. Now, you can play that game with the goal of high score. Meaning I could say, all right, I just want to play for a high score. And then if the first guy dies, you say, oh, fuck. I'm going to commit suicide and then just start over. But the key here is the way to play the game is not for the high score. The way to play the game is just to get more proficient. Playing the game to get more proficient allows you, just by definition, to get the high score. Meaning, going after the high score hurts you. This is kind of the same thing with the presidential campaign. They consider Joe Biden to be the best candidate to beat Trump. But there's nothing behind that. That's just their perceptions of what the outside world is. Those same people thought Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump in spades. The key here is having an actual campaign, having actual people care and get out of their seats to either give you cash or come to their stadiums. That's the standard. That's the thing that gets you the win. I hope you understand what I mean. Going with this quote unquote conventional wisdom that the public wants a Joe Biden, the public is craving a Joe Biden. That's the guy that we need in order to make this work. Missing the fact that Clinton lost, John Kerry lost, Al Gore lost. All of those were the same person. Creatures of the same aspect of the Democratic Party, these third-way Democrats. All of them lost. The conventional wisdom was wrong the entire way through. Obama wins on a message of hope and change. Didn't mean it, but it doesn't matter if he meant it or not. He won on that message. He projected himself, but gave a feel that he was something different, which was exactly what the public wanted. Donald fucking Trump is the president of the United States right now. I guess I'm making the point to you that the way to win it, they're thinking about it backwards. They're thinking in the sense of, well, this guy's more electable, so we're just going to send this guy out there. The catch here is, just because you think he's more electable doesn't mean that people are going to give him money, doesn't mean people are going to push for him or stomp for him. He's not going to sell out stadiums, none of that stuff. We just think he can beat Trump. Just because you think he can beat Trump, and just because you're willing to vote for him, doesn't necessarily mean that he has what it takes, just based on these other elements that are just necessary for a campaign to win. I'm making the point that giving people vision, giving people something that materially affects them and that they care about, that's the way to win. That's the pathway. It's not the other way around. I hope you understand what I mean. Cool Blue 71. Jamal, the sound of that Biden Meet the Press video was too low. C-SPAN 2-1 as well. Let's see. All right, let's try this one more time. All right, so this is Biden Meet the Press. Now, I don't have full control over the volume, so I apologize, but I'll run it one more time. The volume itself sometimes is built in, meaning it's not a thing that I control. But let's try. Let's see what they can get.
There is now 40 million people. It's going to be 80 million in 15 years. Would you consider looking at those programs, age of eligibility, absolutely, cost of living, put it all on the table?
The answer is absolutely. You have to. I mean, it's one of the things that my, the political advisors say to me is, "Whoa, don't touch that."
By the way, not just are you willing to put it on the table, you don't have a choice but to. And what is he talking about? What's the context? Cutting Social Security. Listen to him. He's joining arms with Republicans here. He's bragging.
Look, American people aren't stupid. It's a real simple proposition. We have to do. You and I were talking about Bob Dole earlier. I was one of 5 people. I was the junior guy in the meeting with Bob Dole, George Mitchell, when we put Social Security in the right path for 60 years. I'll never forget what Bob Dole said. After we reached an agreement about gradually raising the retirement age, etc., he said, look, here's the deal. We all put our foot in the boat one at a time. And he kidded me. He stepped like he was stepping into a boat. And we all...
I want you to notice something. The Republicans, right here, they were scared of cutting Social Security. Notice what Joe Biden is saying. He said, all of us are going to put our toe in it together. All of us are going to lock arm in arm as we go and cut or go after Social Security. But it gets across FDR, man. What, this was 70 years? FDR's argument was, look, if you make it a payroll tax and people, receive it, they'll never be able to rip it away from them. Even Republicans the Republicans of this day, even they were scared to put their hands on it. That's amazing. But the point of the clip is to show that Biden was willing to do that. Not just willing to, thought it was a necessity. That's the point. Arm in arm with Republicans in doing so. Let's go to this one. Might as well do all of them again.
Balanced budget amendment of 1984. It got nowhere. I'm one of those Democrats who voted for the constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I have introduced on 4 occasions, entire plans to balance the budget, knowing I'm not president and I'm not the leader, but for illustrative purposes. I tried with Senator Grassley back in the 80s to freeze all government spending, including Social Security, including everything.
A balanced budget amendment, again, is one of the most hysterical right-wing ideas. And the fact that Joe Biden was out there bragging about that is astonishing. That should end his campaign, just in and of itself. And I got to be honest, the Politifact thing is an outright failure. I mean, to try to make the argument that Joe Biden was being sarcastic when Joe Biden has a history of this, meaning there are a litany of videos that show Joe Biden talking about either freezing or cutting Social Security, or adjustments, if you want to call it that. Adjustments is just political speak for cutting Social Security. The fact that the political guy or Politifact guy couldn't find those videos to say, oh, right, here's a context of this where he's on board for this. So this video, he's not being sarcastic. He's saying Paul Ryan is right, and he's going further saying adjustments need to be made to Social Security. Nobody, again, is saying that Joe Biden was Paul Ryan. The point was that Joe Biden said Paul Ryan was right when he was going after Social Security, and that's true. He even says it there. Just saying. And there was one more. I think I killed that one. But that volume on that one was as loud as it could get. So I hope that helped, Cool Blue. Hope that helped. Bernie needs to make an ad with this. Yes. Yes. I mean, like all 3 of these should be attack ads. All 3 of them. And while we're talking about that, let's roll into this story. Somebody, someone, somewhere, some staffer, it may even be Bernie Sanders himself, has been watching this show. At least that's what I think. Or that's what I'm going with. For about 2 months now, I've made the argument, you must hit Biden in his mask. I kept saying it. You must hit Biden in his mask. Now, what I meant by that was pretty straightforward. If you look at the polling, and I like to point out trends in the polling, what you see is that Sanders has been surging recently, especially in Iowa. Now, by real clear politics standards, Sanders is number 1 in Iowa. Sanders is also number 1 in New Hampshire. Both of those are the first 2 states. But my argument has been that this trend of Joe Biden's being in the lead remains. Now, this is the national polling, and I'll get to that in a minute. What I mean by that is the various trends in the race have been maintaining themselves. Elizabeth Warren has been collapsing. Bernie Sanders has been going up and getting stronger in the polling and in public opinion. Biden has been consistent, and if he's been going down, it's just been moderately. But for the most part, he's stayed consistent in the lead. Sanders is getting the young demographic in ungodly numbers. By the same token, he's losing the elderly demographic by ungodly numbers. It's almost a balancing act in regards to the way they balance themselves out. Joe Biden is getting the elderly vote in spades. Joe Biden is getting the elderly black vote, and you could say the black vote. Sanders is getting the youth black vote, however. But for the most part, elderly, African Americans, and this notion that he's more electable. Sanders is making up for this to some degree with the Hispanic vote. Sanders may be considered risky, but among people who care about policy, on policy issues, he wins. On electability, he's considered risky. The electability, as I was showing in many of the other polls, show up clear as day. This is real clear politics. This is an average. National polling, Biden 29, Sanders 20.3. Now, if we go into some of the state polling and you start asking people questions like, who has the best policies? It would be Sanders. Who do you like on environment? Sanders. Who do you like on immigration? Sanders. Who do you like on healthcare? Sanders. And it would be, who do you trust more on these issues? And Sanders, across the board, wins. You get to electability, Biden wins by 20 points. Nobody's even close. Nobody's even close. It's astonishing. There's another poll that just came out that was asking about African American support for the various candidates. Joe Biden, again, wins that by like 20 points. Now, this is Reuters' new poll. This is Reuters' national poll. Now, in Reuters' new national poll, Sanders takes the number one spot. Damn it, that's not what I'm right here. It's more interesting, though, when you get into the numbers themselves and the questions that are being asked. So, for example, because I'm trying to make just a very specific argument that Joe Biden is entirely living off of the elderly vote, the black vote, and electability. One of those needs to be dismantled in order for Sanders to get above the point to which he finds himself. And let me show you what I mean. I wasn't going to go down this alley, but since I'm down this alley, making an argument, I should back the argument up. All right. So this is Morning Consult. Their poll lines up pretty well, actually, with here we are. All right. Morning Consult. Biden, 31%. Sanders, 23%. And they give you the chart. We don't need these other people. They're almost irrelevant to this. Well, they're not irrelevant. If they get out the race, their votes are going to go somewhere. Let's put in Warren and Buttigieg. All right. Now, this is Warren. That's her trend. She's been collapsing. Sanders, he's been going up. That's his trend. Now, the catch here, though, is if you notice, Sanders has a hard time getting above 27% under the current model, even though, for the most part, especially in the early states, he's been surging. Now, I've made the argument on more than one occasion that national polls lie. As you go from state to state to state, that's how you win an election. It's through the states, it's not through a national tally, per se. So the national polling is always somewhat dodgy. When you look at state polling, that's where it's at, and that's where it gets more interesting. So they have the ability to look at early primary state voters. So this goes 29%, 19%. Super Tuesday voters. Look at this. Super Tuesday is a massive, massive haul. And when you look at Super Tuesday, it goes just 4 points. Now, when you look at RCP gives a breakdown of the various things that are taking place in the various states. But if you look at Iowa, for example, Sanders is ahead. If you look at New Hampshire, Sanders is ahead. And even when you go to California, if I'm not mistaken, either Sanders is number one or number two. Right, 0.2. And the recent polling out of California had Sanders in the lead, and multiple recent polling had Sanders in the lead. So Sanders has been able to get close to Biden, especially in these early states. But you can't get close. You have to actually win. And the catch here is, how do you increase your margins? Which is what I strongly suspect that they were dealing with. Meaning, we're going into Iowa. People are paying attention to this election. We are close to Biden in the number 2 spot. It's me and him. Mano a mano. This is what this race is going to be. Yes, these other people are still in the race, but ultimately it's between us. And we need to find a way to get some of those voters to come to us. So we need to challenge the very thing that Joe Biden is prizing, meaning the notion of electability, the black voters, and elderly voters. We need to challenge those things. Now, if you notice, over the past 2 or 3 weeks, Sanders has started to do all of this. All of this. Now, I've always thought the challenging the black voter thing would be somewhat dicey, and you have to kind of deal with that in a particular way. But from the standpoint of electability, they have started hitting Joe Biden on this hard, calling him weak, saying that he has all sorts of baggage that will be essentially a dinner bell, going so far as to say Donald Trump will eat him for lunch. And by the way, this matters. What he may be forecasting is essentially the line that he is going to be using when he's challenging Joe Biden in the upcoming debate that's going to take place on Tuesday. And to some degree, you almost have to do that. I mean, after all, if you're making the case that he's not more electable because Trump can beat him, then you need to do everything within your power, due diligence, not just from the standpoint of the people who are sending you money, their donations and their support and knocking on doors for you, but for America itself. Meaning, yes, you need to throw all of this at the wall. And all of this is necessary. This is your pathway to victory. It is possible that Sanders could win this race, just going the way it is now. By the same token, this attack doesn't necessarily injure Sanders. Ultimately, the people who are backing Sanders would bleed on the flag in order to make that vote. So it doesn't hurt him. There's no back effect to this. But they are hitting him on this. Now, one of the people who are backing Biden brought up Sanders talking about bread lines. And I have to be honest, if that's the best that you can do, meaning if I bring up a substantial list of issues that Joe Biden has dealing with this notion of electability and why he would be such a horrible candidate to put up against Donald Trump, essentially a rerun of Clinton. And the only thing you can say back to me is, well, Sanders is the only guy who says something about bread lines, then I know you don't have anything. Sanders should have been making this conversation a while ago, but it's very possible that they held this up until the last bit going into Iowa because they knew that people were paying attention and they may be that much more effective not that far out. Meaning you don't hit them with the hard stuff when nobody's paying attention. You hit them with the hard stuff when people are paying attention. Joe Biden wasn't going to go anywhere in this race, and so if you just kind of make the assumption that he was going to be in it for the long haul, then you may want to hold what you have, meaning opposition research, until you're getting closer to the point of the votes are going to be dispatched. Sanders, pursuant to this, and just to make the point of electability before going, Democratic primary, who would you want? Now, Sanders, 17%, Biden gets 15%. Sanders goes up 2 in this, if I'm not mistaken, and Biden has dropped, if I'm not mistaken, 3. Very close, but 2-point difference. But now you get into policy. Who do you think is best on immigration? Sanders. Who do you think is best on healthcare? Sanders, and nobody is even close. Nobody's even close. Who do you think is best on environment? Sanders. Nobody is even close. Nobody's near him. Who do you think is best on the economy? Sanders. Again, think about what I just told you. This is Reuters. It's a real poll. Mainstream poll. On the host of issues that are overwhelmingly big deal, and most of them overwhelmingly agreed Sanders is just outright, completely and entirely far and above better than everybody else. I'm sorry, I think it was like 2 of them. But even on the other ones, complete agreement that he's better. There's agreement that he's better. Now, let's go to this one, though. Who do you think is most likely to beat Trump? Biden, and nobody's close. Nobody's close. Now, let's go to this question. Right here. Which of the following candidate traits would be the most important deciding factor for you? Right here, beat Trump. Nothing else is close. The deciding factor is, and when we dispatch our vote, is who beats Trump. You look down here and it says, well, we think Joe Biden is a safe bet to beat Trump. All right, right. We think Joe Biden is a safe bet to beat Trump. And nobody's close to him. And then you go look back up at the polling, and the number makes sense. Well, wait a minute. If Joe Biden or if Bernie Sanders beats out on all of those issues, if he's the person that you think is better on those issues, then why is Joe Biden only 2 points behind him? And again, one of the most important, or two most important questions in the polling is, what is the determining factor for you in making your vote? And B, who do you think beats Trump? Meaning, yes, we think beating Trump is the most important. We think Joe Biden is that guy. So yeah, despite not agreeing necessarily with him on these issues by a wide margin, he still is only 2 points behind in this poll. It's electability. That's the X factor. I mean, otherwise, what else could it be? I mean, after all, you've just said, yeah, I think this other guy is better, but yeah, I'm voting for Joe Biden anyway. It's because they think he's more electable. Sanders goes after his electability. Hitting them on Social Security goes after the elderly. What about the black vote? What about the black vote? How do you do that? How do you do that? You do that by sending Miss Nina Turner out to make your case. Now, Nina Turner comes out with a scorching op-ed. While Bernie Sanders has always stood for African Americans, Joe Biden has repeatedly let us down. Sometimes, when I'm in the parking lot at Thompson's, Elwyn and Thompson's, I have a Bernie Sanders sticker on the back of my car. And I'll be like walking away from my car and I'll see white people looking at me with this kind of, you know, I can see them judging me with their eyes. Now, it took one brave person to be like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys voting for Joe Biden? And why are they voting for Biden like this with all of the shit that he said? Because what they know, that didn't happen, but it makes my point. What they know and what I know, because I've had people ask me this, why are blacks voting for this guy? This guy is horrendous. In one part, maintain the Obama legacy. And another part, they think he's the guy that beat Trump. They think he wins. They think that's the guy that we can sell to the population at large. That's the guy that they'll buy. So when he makes gaffes on the campaign stage, that doesn't really matter. Because again, the point is, well, not that he's the brightest bulb, not even that he has the best policies. It's more so that we think that's the person that we can sell to the rest of the population to get Trump out of office. Who keeps the monsters at bay? Politics, often, especially for our community. Who keeps the monsters at bay? And if that group believes that Joe Biden is that guy, then the gaffes and everything else on the campaign trail are not the thing that's going to stop him. However, if you make an argument that Joe Biden was horrendous in regards to the African American community, well, that may have legs. Joe Biden saying black folks can't raise their kids, that by itself should be a campaign video with the reaction on MSNBC. I can't think of her name. Oh, Zerlina Maxwell. With her reaction immediately after him saying that. That's one campaign video. The campaign videos where he's talking about cutting Social Security, those are campaign videos. I'm just making the point that all of these things that he said over the course of his career should be ads that are run. Just small clips, little, piranhas going after him. But Miss Turner has come out both barrels. Both barrels. And I'm just going to read parts of this. All of this is policy. All of it. There's no smearing in this at all. Zero. That's what's so amazing about this. You don't even need to smear them. All of it can just be policy discussions. And she makes the policy contrast. This is what Biden did. This is what Sanders did. This is what Biden did. This is what Sanders did. And she comes away with the assessment that Joe Biden has outright, utterly betrayed the African American community and black voters. Now, that's a strong statement. That's kind of what I mean when I say both barrels. They're not fucking around anymore. The gloves are off. Ms. Turner is making this argument for the Sanders campaign. So right here, in choosing between the two Democratic presidential candidates atop the polls, African American voters have a consequential decision to make. Will the community side with former Vice President Joe Biden, who has repeatedly betrayed black voters, side with Republicans lawmakers to undermine our progress? Or will they stand with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and a movement that has been fighting for racial and economic justice since the civil rights era? After all, he was marching with King, so let's put that in perspective. So I'm just going to go through a few of these. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I will put it at the bottom. As a recent NBC News headline said of Biden's time in the Senate, Biden didn't just compromise with segregationists, he fought for their cause. The NBC report quoted the NAACP legal director saying that one Biden-backed measure heaves a brick through the window of school integration. And Biden didn't just vote for bills designed to prevent black students from accessing white schools. In a series of personal letters, he actively courted pro-segregationist senators to support the legislation. All of this is true, by the way. I've covered this. Sanders, by contrast, began his work in politics by organizing civil rights protests. As a college student, he helped the local chapter of Congress in racial equity in this push to desegregate housing. Sanders participated in the Reverend Martin Luther King's march in Washington and was arrested for protesting rampant school segregation in Chicago. Now, when Kamala Harris, top-tier candidate Kamala Harris, did her thing about, I want to go after Joe Biden for this racial busing stuff, Sanders could have made that argument. Sanders was marching with King. Sanders got arrested being chained to a black woman. He has the pedigree and the bona fides to make that case, and he should have made that case just to draw attention to himself on that very specific issue. Because what I guarantee you, many people don't know this. They don't know. See right here. Biden also fought alongside right-wing Republicans to pass welfare reform, quote-unquote, that reduced financial support for low-income families. Biden echoed former Ronald Reagan's dishonest welfare quotes, language, and wrote a column conjuring up ugly stereotypes of welfare mothers driving luxury cars and leading lifestyles that mirror the rich and famous. In contrast, Sanders vigorously opposed punitive cuts. What welfare reform did, in my view, Sanders said, was go after some of the weakest and most vulnerable people in our country. 70% of those people were kids that were cut in those reforms. And I got to be honest, the working with segregationists, that in and of itself should have been disqualifying. Like, as an African American, the notion that African Americans are supporting somebody who was outright working with and backing up segregationists is disturbing to me. And yet it's true. I mean, all of this is real stuff that is in Biden's history. This is not smears or anything else. This is your life. She's not making it up. She's not spinning it. She's not doing anything. She's just recounting it. Biden has repeatedly worked with Republicans to try to cut Social Security. I've shown you multiple videos. Even though almost 3/4 of African American beneficiaries rely on Social Security for at least half of their income. At least half of their income. Biden did the bidding of the credit card industry donors by helping Republican lawmakers make it more difficult for Americans to reduce their debts in bankruptcy court. At one point, Biden split with then Senator Barack Obama, almost every other Senate Democrat, to help Republicans kill an amendment to protect medical debts from predatory lenders. Again, that should be disqualifying. Biden's bankruptcy legislation passed in 2005 over the objection of Sanders. 12 years, ProPublica reported that black people struggling with debts are far less likely than their white peers to gain lasting relief from bankruptcy. And today, the differences between Sanders and Biden remain stark. And at this point, you already know, Biden opposes pretty much everything that Sanders is pushing for. And she just goes down the list. He opposes the Medicare for all. He opposes tuition-free college. She makes the point at the end. All of these contrasts underscores the high stakes in this primary election. By supporting a racial justice champion like Sanders and popular progressive agenda, Black Americans will forge a multiracial, multi-generational working class alliance that will generate the high turnout necessary to beat President Donald Trump. Somebody is listening to me. I don't think they are, but I'm just saying. I've been making this case, and apparently the people who were sitting in a room somewhere with him came to the same conclusion. We're getting close to Iowa. We're getting closer to him in the polls. In various states, especially in the Super Tuesday states, we are extremely strong, have a strong position. We need to be able to break through the ceiling, and breaking through that ceiling is piercing Joe Biden's electability and piercing this thing with African Americans or the elderly. And by doing that, you need to show who Joe Biden is. Who Joe Biden is. Not this, hey, I'm Vice President Joe Biden. No. Who Joe Biden has been throughout the course of his career, not the mask that he's trying to shuck and jive with. So, good on Nina Turner for, doing work. Doing work. Nina Turner taking people out to the woodshed. Taking people out to the woodshed. Let's see. Marcus Will, if I can find that. I'm sorry, guys. Usually my wife is here holding down this part, so it's slightly clumsy today. Let's see if I can find this somewhere else. Marcus, it's like they've destroyed your quote. Your super chat. Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say this. Nina going after them like that is fascinating. My thought was, I was like, well, they got to be able to go after the black vote somehow because Biden is using that almost as a shield of sorts. By the same token, it's like that's a finicky subject. I mean, you're getting into issues of race, and it's a little, sometimes it can be a little bit dicey in the way that people regard that stuff. Having Turner go out and do that, especially at this moment. God, man, I would love to question them. Like, are you doing this because you expected this? Like, did you take a political tact that we are going to have a pressure campaign, meaning the closer we get to the election, the more, well, just by definition, you're going to get tighter. You're going to get more, the competitive drive is going to get that much higher the closer you get to Iowa, especially when you get clear on who your opposition, your opponent is going to be, meaning Bernie and Biden. But did you make this assumption that, look, we have a list of things to hit Joe Biden with. We will measure how we hit him as the campaign goes. And go that route? Or is it just a pivot? Is it we're going to just argue policy, but now, and by the way, all of these things are policy, unfortunately. But did you go with this notion that we're just going to argue policy, we're going to talk about the Iraq war thing, we're not necessarily going to go this far into it, and then you make this pivot to electability or to the black vote or to the elderly vote because you realize that's where the numbers are. Even if we could peel away 5%, that's 5% that's in our pocket and not in his. So that's my thought on that. That's effectively what's taking place. All right, let's go to the next one. Marcus, I just want to make sure I get your super chat. Jamarl, testing polls like the Holy Grail, treating polls like the Holy Grail. No. I treat trends like the Holy Grail. Trends I believe in. Oh, trends I believe in. The individual poll, the numbers may vary, but let me say it this way. Do you think it's true that Bernie Sanders is getting the youth vote? And why do you think that's true? Are you looking out of your window? Are you hanging out at Bernie Sanders rallies? Are you going to his places? Or do you see a clear trend in the poll that says he's getting these people in spades? Is Joe Biden getting the elderly vote? Now, again, it's not so much that I don't think the polls may get some of the numbers wrong. They will. I mean, it's a poll. It's only a snapshot. And I still strongly suspect that Sanders is going to blow out the numbers. I think they're underplaying his numbers only because his political strategy is to essentially get more people into the process. Meaning, if he's right, if his theory of the case is right, there are going to be a lot more people that are coming into vote and into caucus. If he's wrong, that won't happen. Those people will evaporate. But the way it looks, it doesn't look like he's wrong. It does not look like he's wrong. Kubalu71, Jamal, the one thing to keep in mind, all 50 states have held primaries since, oh, we did that one. Cheryl Taylor, thank you, Cheryl. So right here, Xavier Foster, did you see Soleimani's IRGC men getting arrested in Iran? Something much bigger is going on. Did the Ayatollah want him gone? That's interesting. That's interesting. There's no way to know. There's literally no way to know, at least not from where we're sitting. There may be more reporting about it, but I don't know. That's a good question. All right, let's see. Let's go to, let's talk about Soleimani killing. I did this video earlier, but the fan was on and that video ended up horribly. So I want to talk about this again. Trump has decided to fixate on Bernie Sanders and he started to attack Sanders. Now, I look at this and think, you're defined by your enemies, right? Like if Elizabeth Warren is fighting Pete Buttigieg, well, they're just fighting for fourth place. Ultimately, the real contest is going on in the first and second place, meaning Sanders and Biden, and the conflict that these two are having. The fact that they're having the conflict at all shows that the conflict is between them two. It's almost a self-fulfilling thing. The media looks at it. These two are clearly in the lead, and the public gets it in their heads. These two are in the lead. The fact that Warren, however, is going after or going back and forth with Buttigieg gets across where she is. I hope you understand what I mean. Buttigieg is eating into her numbers to some degree. At the very least, he was. As he was going up, she was collapsing. She had to engage and threw a punch at Buttigieg. She went after the wine cave. She was also going after him on the campaign trail. You are defined by your enemies. Trump, President of the United States, recognized what we've recognized for the past several years. Not only is Sanders electable, but he is probably the most electable person to run against Donald Trump. Trump is beginning to notice. As the primary states are coming in, I would imagine his advisors are telling him. He may even be seeing it for himself. News articles and whatnot are coming out talking about Sanders' strength in his case. So he recognizes, all right, I can't just focus on Biden anymore. So I am going to also now attack Sanders. This is Trump. Listen to what he says, though.
Crazy Bernie has condemned the U.S. military strike on Soleimani, the world's top terrorist. Think of it, the world's top terrorist. And we're having people like Nancy Pelosi. It's a real genius. Do you believe that one? Nancy, nervous Nancy. But here's a guy who slaughtered and butchered civilians all over, and military, whoever was in his way. And we have Bernie and Nancy Pelosi, we have them all. They're all trying to say, how dare you take him out that way? You should get permission from Congress. You should come in and tell us what you want to do.
The president is not a king. Just so we're very clear, the president is not a king. Yes, the president is supposed to get military. The military budget is through Congress. I mean, yeah, if the president, this argument of an imminent attack, and that's the catch. When Donald Trump was being interviewed about this, Donald Trump made the point, well, he was going to go after multiple embassies. Now, when Donald Trump said that, I could look at his face and tell he was lying. He made this shit up on the spot. Early on, when this was coming up, you could tell they were lying. They were using quote unquote imminent in a political sense. Goebbels would have been proud of Trump using imminent in that term, essentially using the opposite. Meaning their use of imminent was effectively the opposite of what the actual term meant. There was no imminent attack. There wasn't anything like that. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, decided he wanted to murder somebody who was a functionary of another person's state. Meaning a person who was a head of that state, or a head. And I'm not saying the leader of the state. I'm just saying in the top government of that state, a general, a war hero, a defeater of ISIS or a fighter of ISIS, and yes, pushing back the United States when it illegally and criminally invaded Iraq. I hope you understand what I mean by this. He was the head of state. If it's fair game to take out Soleimani, then every head of state is fair game. The notion that the guy had blood on his hands, are you telling me that Trump doesn't have blood on his hands? When Donald Trump first got in office, if you remember, one of the first missions went awry and all of those people were killed, many of which were women and children and civilians. That's called blood on your hands. All of the U.S. presidents have blood on their hands. Pompeo has blood on his hands. Bolton has blood on his hands. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? The guy is a general in the military. We used to at the very least have a common respect to acknowledge that the person was a general or was something in another, functioning in the capacity of another military. Now we call them terrorists. Trump uses the term terrorist again in a political language, political casting. It is illegal under our laws to do assassinations. When Obama killed bin Laden, there's an awesome piece in the New York Times where it goes through his legal reasoning for it, how all of these lawyers were coming together in order to create legal reasoning and justifications for even the killing of bin Laden. He had no justification for this. He just did it. The imminent threat thing was something that they were using to try to come up with this notion of, here's our justification for it. When Mike Lee and the other senators came out, they said this was the worst gig, this was the worst explanation that we've ever had. He said that I've ever had in my time in Congress. Lee, Republican, likes Trump, even within the talking about that, when he just went scathing rebuke of what they gave them, calling that some kind of briefing. Before he did it, he had his tongue firmly in Trump's ass. I guess my point is he wasn't doing this for political hit points. He was doing it because he looked at this and said, you just murdered a head of state for another country. And this is a massive, massive deal. And the media should be treating it as such. The media asks questions in this kind of way of as if their instincts say, well, yeah, we think this is a big deal. By the same token, we have an American perspective on things, and we don't particularly like Iran, so we're not going to make a huge deal out of it. But we're going to ask questions that get across the problem with this. Trump is lying here. Trump always lies, so that's not necessarily new news. Take a look at Pompeo. Again, imminent threat. That's their argument. That was an imminent threat. Trump goes further and says they were going to take down 4 embassies. They're going to take down 4 embassies. This is Pompeo. Pompeo is the guy working for the CIA, head of CIA at one point. And he said, I was trained to lie, cheat, and steal. That was my job. The catch here is Pompeo doesn't lie all that well. Listen to what Pompeo says here. Pompeo impeaches his own testimony.
Well, I got lots of different feedback from the briefing. I was one of the briefers. I thought we did a dynamite job. I mean that in the truest sense. That we did our level best to present them with all the facts that we could in that setting, in a closed setting, more than we can frankly say on your show today.
But Vice President Pence said to reveal more, the compelling intel could have compromised sources and methods, Mr. Secretary. Does that mean that the intel briefers in this administration don't trust Congress with classified information? Because that's what it sounded like.
But we shared.
Basically, they haven't given Congress anything to justify this notion of imminent threat. And even she's like, well, wait a minute. Are you telling me that you can't even reveal this to Congress? Ultimately, the Trump administration is effectively saying, trust us. That's what he's sitting here saying. Trust us. We can't reveal it. It's imminent, but we can't reveal it. Just trust us. This is one of the most deceitful administrations that has ever occupied this office. And that is including with Bush. That's including Bush. And the catch here is they don't do it well. They don't do bad things well. Listen to this.
An awful lot with them yesterday. There are things that only certain members of Congress get to hear, and I know Senators Lee and Paul care about this a great deal. They want to protect the prerogatives of the legislative branch. They have a view of the War Powers Resolution. I think members of Congress get frustrated by this sometimes. And so this wasn't political in the Republican-Democrat sense. This was executive legislative. And so I think there are a number of people who are using this as a political axe to grind. I think that's most unfortunate. There is no doubt that there were a series of imminent attacks that were being plotted by Qasem Soleimani. We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where. But
there were a series of imminent attacks. We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where. What's wrong with that statement? Think about it for the moment. What's wrong with that statement? Let's go into the term imminent. Imminent is a temporal term. By temporal, I just mean it relates to time. It's something that is going to happen in a short span of time. That is literally what the word means. Imminent. It's going to happen almost immediately. It's a short span of time, duration of time before something takes place. We got to act. We got to act. We got to act. Ticking time bomb. But to turn around and say we don't know where and we don't know when, also temporal. Now, temporal in the sense that when is a point in time. The two things conflict. We don't know when and we don't know where, but it's imminent. We know that much. That statement doesn't make sense. It's an imminent attack, something that's going to happen almost immediately, very soon. But we don't know when it's going to happen. So wait, is it imminent or you don't know when it's going to happen? I mean, if you don't know when it's going to happen, how can you say it's imminent? They're making this shit up as they go along. That's Pompeo. Listen to Defense Secretary Esper. Interview. Trump says they're going to knock down multiple embassies.
Attacks against additional embassies.
Trump, they're going to attack multiple embassies. All right. Well, if they're going to attack multiple embassies, okay, why do you think this? And, is there something to back this up? Well, let's talk to the Defense Secretary. We heard Pompeo essentially talking out of his ass, lying through his teeth. What about the Defense Secretary? Is he going to lie for Trump?
Was there a difference? What the president said was he believed that it probably and could have been attacks against additional embassies. I shared that view. I know other members of the National Security Team shared that view. That's why I deployed thousands of American paratroopers to the Middle East to reinforce our embassy in Baghdad and other sites throughout the region.
Probably and could have been. That sounds more like an assessment than a specific, tangible threat with a decisive piece of intelligence.
Well, the president didn't say it was a tangible, he didn't cite a specific piece of evidence. What he said is he believed.
Are you saying there wasn't one?
I didn't see one with regard.
Right there. I didn't see one. I'm not going to laugh at him. The president said he believed that there probably and that there could have been. And she says, so wait, there was a specific piece of intelligence? Well, I didn't see it. I mean, but, the president believed and, probably and could have been. That sounds different from imminent. That sounds a lot different from imminent. Because the imminent thing was nonsense. It was BS. It was ludicrous on its face. They were lying through their teeth as they were saying it. The political language was dripping off of it from day one. Imminent attack. Terrorists. And anybody, rational human being, looking at this says, this guy's a head of state. And if he's a terrorist because he was pushing back a foreign invasion force that was coming into a side, or at that point, a country that was invaded by various elements, well, everybody's fair game then. Think of all the military incursions the United States has been engaged in. And let's be very clear. We invaded Iraq. We ended up killing 1 million people. 1 million people died in that country as a result of our actions in that country. Not to mention the refugees, not to mention the people who were maimed, not to mention people, doors kicked in, families, civilians. I mean, the notion, and don't misunderstand me, people who have lost limbs, have lost family members in that country, I can absolutely understand, or at the very least, I can empathize in anger associated with it. But I would make the point to you that the anger is not honestly at Iran, or for that matter, the anger is not even at Iraqis who were defending their soil against a foreign invader who came in yelling and lying about weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. Your argument, your anger should be leveled at your government for sending your particular person over there in order to fight in that war. Trump is lying. The Pentagon, we don't know anything about those embassies. And Pompeo, who has an imminent attack, but he doesn't know when that immediate attack is going to take place. They're lying. We've just murdered a head of state. And I don't know what's more terrifying, that the media is not more outraged, or that the media is not more hair on fire about this. And the token gesture of Congress to pretend as if they're against this, by Democrats pretending they're against it. This is a terrifying outcome. And I know there are a lot of people who support Trump and think that this is a win. I'm sorry, this is not a win. there are tens of millions of people in that country and across the world that hate your guts after this. The missile attack, it's not their attack. Meaning the missile attack that hit that base, yes, that is sent from Iran, but that is not the attack. Iran was never going to go mano a mano with the United States. They were never going to, we're going to meet you out back in the schoolyard. The United States is this kind of jock with brass knuckles. Iran is not that jock with brass knuckles, and they would get punched in the face over and over again. Whether or not the United States could pacify it and hold it is a little bit different from the standpoint of them being able to blow shit up. That's not what they would do. No rational actor would do something like that. Yes, they would fire those missiles. Yes, they would alert the Iraqi base so the people can get out. And I would imagine they knew that they were going to alert the Americans. The actions that they took were token. They weren't necessarily done in a way of trying to kill Americans in response for the retaliation in that sense. They needed to do something, however, for their population that was in outright outrage. They were apoplectic and had every right to be. If that was us, even if it was somebody we didn't particularly like, if George Bush had been drone striked going to some country that he was invited in, we would be outraged. I don't know if I would have been that much outraged, but most of the country would have been outraged. They would have said, how dare you, even for George Bush. Even if it was somebody else, if they did Pompeo, we would be outraged. And yet this gets it's not American, it's fair game. What does this mean for other governments that we don't like? Venezuela. Well, Bolivia now, I guess you could say, is one of the liked governments. But we've just assassinated a head of state brazenly and openly. And the people who are supposed to come out here and back up the narrative and support the narrative are failing miserably at their jobs because ultimately, I don't even think they believe they need to support the narrative. The President of the United States took an action. That's all that's necessary. And all of these other people, the media is not going to overly push them on it. The media may just ask the question, but they're not necessarily going to overly push and engage. And so, yeah, this is what you get. This is what you get. My point, my basic point, is they were giving up the goods. They were lying from jump. They were lying from jump. Said they were lying from jump. Can't stand Pompeo. It's a disgusting human being. All right, let's see. Do I have another one? Wait, first, who's here? Trudy. What's going on, Trudy? That red said they'll not be found undeclared wars. Let's see. Melissa Petrovic. Ah, thank you, Melissa. Cool Blue 71. In 2016, Bernie nationally won 17 of 29 primary voters with 70% to Hillary's 28%. He won them with over 80% in Iowa and New Hampshire, which set the trajectory of the race. And in it, Michigan, and a close primary state, Pennsylvania. Cool Blue, look, I think he's going to overperform. The fact that, keep in mind what's taking place here. Sanders, who in 2016, they just said, oh, people were just angry at Clinton. That's why they were voting for Sanders. All right, now you get into this race. And you have, 22 other Democrats in the race, including 2 billionaires. The 2 billionaires, one spent over $100 billion. The other one spent like $80 or $90 billion. And Sanders has been outraising everybody else in the race, despite being grassroots funded all throughout. Meaning, he never took this extra money and dumped. He's been this way all throughout. And he's been able to outraise all of them. He has more money in the bank. He has more fundraising. He has larger crowds. And his argument is, look, the only way you beat Trump is by expanding the electorate, and that's what I'm going to do. Not just that, that's the only way for him to win. They think that's a risky proposition. That's not risky. That is his only path to victory. And so any polling agency that takes this into account, they can't take that. They're going to take their, whatever their metric is. If he's right and he overperforms, that number is going to be tremendous. I mean, right now, with the way they're looking at this race, he's still leading in Iowa. He's still leading in New Hampshire. And again, this is with 22 other people in the race. And with Warren in the race. Because Warren is eating into his numbers. Meaning there's a large percentage of people, the majority, would go to him if Warren wasn't in the race. So that's, in spite of her being in the race, he's still winning number 1 in Iowa, New Hampshire, and in many other polling that came out, number 1 in California. Look, I told you, I think he can win this thing. And these guys are waking up to something that I thought was clear as day from early on. The public wants something fundamentally different. And you had a situation where the Democratic Party lost all sorts of legitimacy in that 2016 race, not to mention talking about we can lie in court and all this other stuff. Those things have consequences. You had a progressive or a lefty group within the party that took this opportunity to challenge this hegemonic norm within the party. It was challenged in 2016, and the residents of 2016, almost like the fall of Sparta 300, where even though he lost, for the most part, he stayed relevant and he maintained and kept going. He never stopped. That momentum just carried on back into the 2020 race. And for all those people who thought, oh, he's not going to keep that support stayed. That support stayed. His thing is increasing his numbers. Melissa Petrovic, thank you, Melissa Petrovic, and Trudy. What did you say, Trudy? Right here. The Reds said that they will not fund undeclared wars. The resolution said they would not fund undeclared wars. Oh, right. Well, their issue here is that Trump goes and kills Soleimani. Well, what do you think Iran's response is going to be? Just logically. I mean, what would your response be? You're a human being just like they are. You have a notion of national identity just like they do. And within the context of that national identity, national sovereignty, this notion that the state should be able to protect the citizens, but also this notion of just outright outrage that one country, whatever the country is, would outright and flagrantly murder one of its citizens in this way, especially one that is considered a hero. What do you think their reaction would be? The most logical reaction in the world would be for them to strike back in some way. Well, if they strike back in some way, what would the United States do? The United States, at the very provocation of hitting the embassy, turned around and murdered one of their citizens. Nobody died in that. Meaning nobody died in an embassy raid. It might have embarrassed you, but nobody died. So just because nobody died in the missile launch doesn't mean that the U.S. wouldn't behave in a particular way. The catch here is that Iran tips his hand when it notifies the Iraqi base. What I mean by that is they know that the Iraqis are working with the Americans. Those Iraqis would most likely notify the Americans because if anything happens and the Iraqis get out of Dodge, the Americans are going to turn around and say, you knew and you didn't say anything to us. We have all these people who are dead. Iran has to know that. They're rational actors. So the notification to Iraq, for the most part, tips their hand in regards to, we don't want anybody killed in this. We don't want to escalate. Let's just end this and let's call this shit a day. Now, that is a demeaning position for them to have to take. The missile strike, which came across as an act of strength, was really just an act of weakness. It was the best that they could do. Some, a flaccid response. But again, they're rational actors. Their objective is not, we're going to meet you out back and we're going to have it, on as a 101 in front of the world stage. That's not what they want. And if they can help it, they're going to try to avoid it. But again, they may not be able to help it. In fact, of the matter is, the issue that Congress has is you're going into this all on your own, entirely undeclared. You're starting a war. Cool Blue 71, 18 to 29 year age group is the first carried by Democrats in the general election. John Kerry is the last to lose the popular vote. The only age group that he won was 18 to 29. This is partly why Democrats blew it. Hillary in 2016. Well, you see Sanders is getting that vote. In 2016, Sanders was getting like 70% of that vote. In some of those states, 80% of the vote. It was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. Look, I look at this, and the biggest hurdle for Sanders is the primary. It's just this. The Democratic Party is going to throw everything at the wall to stop him. Once he gets out of it, then this question becomes, who do you hate more, Trump or Sanders? You have nowhere else to go. We're back to that argument, but in reverse. The catch here is, I think he pulls people into the electorate. And I think this message, meaning your material interests, I think it affects people, especially when they start believing, well, wait a minute, this guy is right. We can make policy. We are a democratic country. We can make these policies that are in our material interests. Tony Monk, maybe we could trigger him. Then you control them and see. Fred Edwards, the Trump administration listed Iran's Revolutionary Guard as military. Oh, their military as terrorists. Yeah, he did. I mean, after pulling out of the JCPOA, he ends up listing them as military. He ends up pulling military assets in that particular region of the world. He ratchets up sanctions. I mean, he starts seizing their ships. I mean, for fuck's sake. Like, these are policies that he chose to take. Nobody forced them. He chose it. Philip Blair. We need the voting age to be 16, like Austria. You know, this year, or this election is going to be the first election, if I'm not mistaken, where the youth vote is going to be the most. Sanders has to get something out of Biden from the elderly vote. I mean, I think in one of those polls, he was getting like 5% of the vote over 60. It was extraordinary. I missed your super chat, Marcus. Hold on. All right. Hold on. Find it. Do you think that impeachment will be ramped up again as we get close to the general election? I see this as the only hurting Bernie or Biden. So that's an interesting thing, right? It hurts Biden from the standpoint of Hunter. I mean, have you seen Trump's... God, man, I could do a video just showing Trump's rally where he's talking about Hunter Biden. That is going to be vicious. It's going to be vicious. He has like a t-shirt, Where's Hunter? Where's Hunter? And he goes on this riff where the audience is just eating out of the palm of his hand. He's talking about Hunter Biden making all of this money. And the catch here is he's not lying. When he's going on this riff, that riff just so happened to be true. And it is brutal. It is brutal. You're going to see stuff like Pete's Wine Cake. You're going to see Where's Hunter? Hunter's the baby. You're going to see all sorts of stuff. It is going to be vicious. Utterly vicious. I got to be honest. I don't know Cool Blue. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is not sending the papers. It's fucking unprecedented. You're going to have an impeachment, but you're not going to send it to the Senate. So it's unclear what Nancy Pelosi is going to get out of this. Meaning, her holding the papers doesn't put pressure on Republicans. I don't know why she thinks that. And them screaming that, Republicans are not going to get a fair hearing, as if what took place in the House was an entirely fair hearing. It's like we weren't partisan actors at all. The entire impeachment process in and of itself is a partisan act. You could have censored the president. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard's plan was probably that much better. She went much further and much broader than these obstruction and improper dealings with the foreign state. Check Streamlabs. I will check Streamlabs. Apparently my wife is here, which is interesting because I thought she was too broken up to be doing this today. But I do greatly appreciate her help on the show. Let's see. We have Streamlabs. I'm sorry. All right, let's see. Burnman23. What do you think MMT have concerns about inflation, incentive for wars, for petrodollar, compromising climate change goals, redistribution plus punishment for white-collar crime, and a better course? Everybody to right of Yang should be voting in Republican primary. You can make an argument that we're using MMT right now. I mean, we're paying nearly $1 trillion for the military. We have, $23 trillion in debt, something to that effect. We spent $10 trillion for the Iraq war. Bush, when Obama got in office, if you remember, Bush hadn't even put the thing on the budget. So you can make a case that says we're using it now. We're just using it for destructive purposes. Ultimately, our military is a jobs program. Half of our budget for the military goes to payments? It's not even the weapons and stuff. I don't have an issue with MMT in the sense that none of this stuff is real. Money isn't real. It's just a marker of something. It's almost like an agreement that you make or that we all make, and it's kind of idolized within the cash itself. This dollar has a particular value in the sense of the labor that was commissioned in order to make the dollar, all that stuff. So fair enough. MMT just makes it that much more clear that none of this is real. Look, whatever excuse you need in order to ensure that nobody is on the street, to ensure that nobody is hungry, to ensure that kids can go to school, to ensure that people don't get all that debt on their backs when they try to go to college, to ensure that people's basic needs are met: food, clothing, fresh air, fresh food, not just food, but fresh food. And to be able to do something where they have a sense of self or a sense of community in regards to the way they go about their affairs, not this kind of just individualization that we have in our current society. If MMT wants to come up with a contrary argument of saying we should do money in this way because it allows us to do these priorities and we've been looking at this wrong, this money isn't real, ultimately we own fiat currency, etc., have at it. I don't care. I don't look at it as real. I look at what are the real world consequences of the actions that you're taking. The argument for MMT is an argument, just like the argument for the way we do our current system is just an argument for the way we organize ourselves. There's no God that says it must be one way or the other. We almost just kind of de facto choose by perpetuating in our system. It's easier to get along as opposed to burn shit down, especially when you don't have the group with you. So for the most part, we function in our system. I mean, ultimately, you only have revolution or conform and try to make change. The MMT thing, with the argument that they're making, is we should be spending money up into the level of full employment, or not full employment, to the resources. Meaning, because we're on a fiat currency, the resources themselves, those are the things that are real. And as long as your money is not chasing resources, then you don't have to worry about inflation. And part of the argument they make is, well, where's the inflation? We've been dumping trillions and haven't seen inflation. So I'm not against it or for it. It's one of those things, it's just an argument that people make. If that argument ensures that people are fed, clothed, etc., then I am less caustic to it. Yeah, I'm not for it, against it. Jefferson Reeve Barker. Trump's fear of Bernie is showing more and more, getting O'Keefe to go after him. Yeah, if he's doing that, then yeah, he's concerned. I think Trump knows what I know. If Joe Biden is running against you, policy is secondary. I mean, after all, Joe Biden got in winning the primary, not from policy, but from electability. We think he's more electable, so, we're going to vote for that guy. Well, what happens in the general, right? And if Trump also is not entirely focused on policy, I mean, he may go into it somewhat, but Biden is the weakest person to put up against Trump. And I understand that people think he's more electable because they've seen him around, he's been around forever and all this stuff. That's just familiarity. That's not electability. That's different. And that familiarity with Clinton let them down. That familiarity with John Kerry let them down. Yeah, that familiarity with Al Gore let them down. All three of those failures are essentially the exact same person that Joe Biden is. And if our electorate has not shifted over to, all right, we've met our new norm now, meaning we're at a chaotic time. It's happening all around the world, not just here in the United States. And if we haven't gotten to the point where we're past that, we want something fundamentally different, then Joe Biden is going to lose. The person you put up, Trump, to nullify him, meaning the populist stuff, goes away when you have Sanders standing across from him in a dispatch box. And this notion of this newness and everything else, again, goes away. He's nullified. The arguments that they're going to have are going to be on, what have you been doing? You're a liar. You're a failure. You're corrupt. And fact of the matter is, it is hard for Joe Biden to make those arguments against Trump. Sanders can credibly do so. I'm telling you, I understand why they think Joe Biden is more electable, because they, the people who they interact with, they deal with, media, people, their family members and everything else. But he's not. The Hunter Biden stuff is vicious. And, Joe Biden can get as mad as he wants about Trump going in that particular area. It's not just going to be Trump. It's going to be all of these Republicans and all of this stuff. Black folks can't take care of their kids. All of that stuff is going to be run and hit with Joe Biden. Joe Biden can't call Trump corrupt because he's going to get hit with the same label. That's just like Clinton couldn't call Trump sexist because he was going to have all of those women that Bill Clinton essentially molested, or in some cases potentially raped. This is the same effect that's going to take place when Joe Biden and Bernie and Trump are one-on-one. He is not the strongest candidate. And yeah, it is. Sanders needs to throw everything in the fucking kitchen sink in order to make that clear. Kills for a living. This video convinced me to vote Elizabeth Warren. You're wrong, JT. She's the hardest worker, whatever that means. And do you think he endorsed Warren because Obama is pulling for her? Oh, Obama's pulling. I don't know. That's a good question. Look, I do think that stuff is going on behind the scenes where these guys are trying to push people into races or push people, to not race. Think back to Steny Hoyer. Steny Hoyer got audio taped telling somebody to get out of the race because the Democratic Party had already chose who it wanted in the various areas. And this guy was like, how are you going to tell me to get out of the race? Nancy Pelosi got pissed off because the guy audio taped him, not the fact that Steny Hoyer was telling somebody who has every legitimate right to run in their political process to get out. So, yeah, there's that. There's that. What is this? In the future, people are going to watch videos of Trump and wonder, why did anyone follow that guy? The way people today watch footage of Hitler and wonder, why did people follow him? But see, Trump is not Hitler. Trump is not Hitler. God, I hate those comparisons. I've just finished reading Enemy at the Gates. I can't think of the name of the author, but Enemy at the Gates. Now, I think Beaver Stalingrad is better, but Enemy at the Gates was a really good book. What Germany was doing and what Hitler was doing, there's no comparison. Like, it's not close. It's just, there's nothing there. Like Trump hasn't invaded another country. That's the first point. Just start there. Yes, we have concentration camps here in the United States. They are not being starved to death or worked to death, even though those conditions are outright abysmal and horrendous. There's a difference between Auschwitz versus what is taking place at our border. You can have something that be horrendous, but not necessarily be Nazis, if you get my point. There's no comparison. I'm sorry, this is just not, like the stuff that they were doing is just, it's extraordinary. I mean, they were using Jews for leather, like for belts and whatnot. I mean, the mass killing and slaughter. I mean, for the most part, the propaganda that they were feeding them in order to get their soldiers to do this stuff, to feeding these guys coke or crack and whatnot. Many of these guys were on crack when they were going about doing their duties. They were horrendous. Like it's hard to get across where this person is a non-life. It's a non-entity. It's a non-entity entity. Meaning they can be killed, slaughtered, and there's no consequence for it. In fact, not just no consequence for it, you're rewarded for such in odd cases. Even having the military for the longest time tried to say that they weren't part of this, but the military was part of this. There were some people who were part of the military that was vehemently against what was taking place because you had two dispatches. You had the military detachment, but you also had what came after the military, which was going to pacify the population from the standpoint of Jews, Russians, and eventually, essentially any undesirable in the population. Yeah, we're going to get rid of those. And to do it with merciless prosecution. Even like the revenge killings, those type of things, I'm sorry, there's no comparison. There's just not. But Frank Friel, I appreciate the super chat. All right. Marcus, I missed your chat again? How am I missing your stuff, dude? Hold on. Bernie needs to distance himself from impeachment. So that's an interesting point. I don't know if he can. Cory Booker did. The problem is Bernie Sanders is running in a Democratic primary, and a lot of Democrats hate Bernie Sanders' guts. And Democrats have become rabid in this kind of unison push of impeachment. Now, Sanders has made two arguments, both of them related. One, Trump is a corrupt liar and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the same token, we can't just focus on Trump. So between everybody, he wasn't necessarily the one that was on board for impeachment. He just kind of got dragged to the position since he's going to be sitting in the Senate. It is difficult for him to do that, if you know what I mean. Like, the argument that he made is the argument that he's going to continue to make. This election has to be more than about Trump. This election has to be about more than just Trump. And the impeachment distracts from it. I've always made that argument that impeachment is a distraction. Let's see, Jay. True or false? In Jenk's head, he believed he was going to be a bigger draw than AOC's congressional run. I think he is humbled by this experience. Good. I got to be honest, I don't know. And I support Cenk in this. Now, the thing is, this is the funny part to me. My thought, and the reason why I was so fascinated by this, because Cenk talks a lot of shit from his from his perch. Oh, if I was in that race, I would do this. Oh, you got to do this when you're in a race. Oh, you got to push it in their face. That's how he runs his campaigns. That's how he thinks when he's talking about it. You got to be a tough guy. You got to be strong. Now, I agree with him that you got to be strong in this stuff. If you run, they're going to chase you the rest of your life. So I don't disagree with him. And I've always said that Cenk was my favorite on the Young Turks. The brashness I actually liked. Politics, though, doesn't always conform to what you think it does. And yeah, he's going to be running in this race. I don't know what he thought he was going to be, meaning as a draw. I imagine he hoped he would be a big draw. Whether it was going to be as big as AOC. The thing is, with AOC, nobody saw it coming. Cenk Uygur has been the host of the Young Turks for, 10 years, over a decade now. I don't know if he's well known in the rest of the population, but he is known on the left. But the left, and more people than on the left, will be voting in that race. So, Jay, you might be right. This might have humbled the shit out of him after seeing the results of this. I mean, after all, you go into a race and you try to do your thing. And look, he's raising money and whatnot. But I don't know what the polling is up to this point in that race. But I would imagine he thought he would, I don't think he would have jumped in if he didn't think he would do well. So I would be interested in the polling. I would be really interested in the polling on how well he's doing up to this point. My thing was more like a scientific thing. Like after being perched on the Young Turks for all that time and having all these ideas about politics, then great. Now you get into politics. All right, you're the idea man on this. Make that shit work. Make it work. So my fascination was with whether or not he would make it work. Whether or not all of these ideas of brashness and everything else that they came up with, whether he would be able to make it work. That was my curiosity. By the same token, I think what they did to, what's that woman's name? Katie, I can't think of her last name. Was horrendous. Was absolutely horrendous. And so I would prefer somebody to take that seat to be a tick left of the Democratic Party. Kelly Hudson, thank you for your insight and consistent content. Aw, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, kisses on the ego are always appreciated. All right. I am dragging ass. And I'm going to go up and check on my wife. And I may be back because there is... Well, I need to cut these videos, but I may be back. There's one or two other videos I want to do. There's one dealing with AOC, and they were telling her to get out of the party. I don't know if you've seen this. CNN ran a op-ed where the woman is telling AOC she needs to get out of the party. Extraordinary article with that woman is writing. But I'll leave it here, guys. Thank you for your support. Honestly. This is a new year. This year is going to be extremely busy. And so much so, I honestly was thinking about taking a few days off just in the week. January 23rd, I believe, I start on the radio show that is going to go from 12 to 2. Now, that show going from 12 to 2, all of those shows, I made the deal to have all of those shows piped through this channel. So every show that takes place Monday through Friday, 12 to 2, will take place through this channel, meaning you're going to get consistent, time and, professional radio show content. Marcus Will, everyone saw AOC coming after Trump's campaign run. Oh, you say everybody saw her coming? No way. The media never covered her at all. It was only lefty networks that covered her. That's why they were so shocked to shit after she won. If you remember, all of the media attention just descended upon her all at once. Because for the longest time, they never accepted her as being a real challenge. Crowley was the number 3 in the Democratic Party at that point from the standpoint of the House. Like, he had won that seat for like 20 years. Nobody thought she was going to win that race. Nobody thought she was going to win that race. But my last point. The show will still remain the same. Meaning, in the evenings, it may not be every day, but in the evenings, there will also be additional content, just like what we're doing right now. Well, not like right now, but the typical show. So this year is going to be somewhat of a busy year. But I do want to thank all of you for your support on this channel, whether you give monetary denomination, or whether you like the video, whether you share the video, or whether you just watch the video. All of those things, to me, I am appreciative of. I am always shocked as shit that I have a channel. I'm shocked as shit that I'm doing this for a living. Talk about corners in life that you can't see around. But exciting. So couldn't have done it without all of you, and I thank you for it. Maggie Smith, name of your new show, Political Misfits. Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. That's not bad. Oh, Maggie, you might have named that shit. I need to give this to Bob. I like this. We've not been able to decide on a name. I've come up with Context with Bob and Thomas. He didn't particularly like that one. It was too plain. He came up with Politics or Political Anonymous. I thought that was a little strange, but not bad. State and Maine. I thought that was too formal, even though, it's a little strong. We have not been able to come up with a name. I've gotten to the point of saying, let's just put it in a hat and we pluck stuff out of a hat. But I don't know. Political Misfits, good. I like it. Adam Bell. I like it too, Adam. Barbara Marissa. She's the Bill Clinton of the century. Yeah, right. Daniel Gallinier. Uphill Media starting a radio station. Who's Uphill Media? I don't know who that is. No, this is going to be Sputnik. I am going to be on Sputnik. Garland and Lee used to bring me on their show. And I think I was going on a show almost for 2 years. And when Lee was out, I handled Lee's spot. And I handled it apparently very well. Not to mention the other radio spots that I did there. I had been working on multiple shows, and at that point, they got a feel for what I do, this. And, they offered me a job. As long as I could have kept the show, I was going to take it. It was like you had me at hello. How could you turn up a radio gig? It's the first radio gig. So, it's funny. It's not a clean win. It's the Sputnik thing is always slightly weird, only because it's the perception. It's the outside perception that I think I'm feeling. I know there are some fucking racist people here, especially with the Russian stuff, especially within the context of the Democratic Party. They have gone with this notion of the Russians are the reason that Clinton have lost, and they have wed that to them almost like, putting a knife in the fabric of sorts. So that's always a little weird. I mean, negotiating that, but so what? You can't give a shit about people don't matter. And this is an amazing opportunity. Everybody I've seen there have been pretty awesome. And I've never been told not to say once, but that was Lee's thing. And that was him feeling some kind of way about the fact that it wasn't him that just got. But no, as long as I can speak my piece, I'm good. And I'm keeping this show, so, worst come to worst, I can always just return to this. Well, not return because the show's not going anywhere, but you know what I mean. Like, share, subscribe. Sean C., Jamal, name it, political consciousness. That way your show is PC. Oh, I like that. Oh, politically correct. Political consciousness is not bad either. I don't know about that. I don't know. I need to see what Bob thinks about that. I got to be honest. I am partial to Political Misfits. I love this. I love that. Maggie, you might have nailed that shit in the bud. Maggie Smith was here. This will be here for all time, Maggie. In a landfill somewhere, but for all time. Like, share, subscribe. And again, thanks all.